Tonight is the biggest game of the year for Nebraska basketball yet in its push, not just to make the NCAA tournament, but to win there. Hear us out. That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
All right, welcome. It is Thursday. Connor Happer here, Mitch Sherman there, as we're going to bounce around to a few different sports here to start this Thursday show. But let's start with basketball. As Mitch said, Nebraska basketball at home tonight at Pinnacle Bank Arena at 7:30 against Maryland. And it is a huge game. Nebraska obviously come, on a pretty hot streak at the moment. I think, Mitch, that they've erased what has, that 6-game losing streak. It's basically gone. I know they've only won 4 back off of that losing streak, but as far as like where you stand from the NCAA tournament perspective, I feel like they're back to kind of where they were after they beat UCLA the first game of the new year. So now represents a chance to continue to get ahead. Maryland is a really good team. It's a quad one opportunity tonight at home.
Yeah, I don't know if they're quite there in my mind. I think if you think about where they were after that UCLA game, it was the high moment of the season, and I think they're close, like they're climbing that mountain. But I don't know that the taste is well. I think for the players and the fans, yeah, the taste is out of their mouth as far as how horrible it was to go through that 6-game losing streak that seemed to kill the season. But I think with the tournament potential, like with the doubts that could creep back in if you go through another, even just a little bit of a skid, like you can start to feel like that again. I feel like some of that residual is still there. I don't know if you'll ever 100% get rid of it. I suppose you could by rolling off like 8 wins here. But
this is Nebraska basketball, Mitch. You never get rid of that.
We can talk about that.
Dread and doom. That's never going anywhere.
I don't know. We can talk about that's another question that maybe we can get to in this discussion here about Husker hoops, about whether that dread should be there, whether Nebraska basketball today should live with the weight on their shoulders of decades of disappointment. But for me, like if I'm looking at it just this year, Connor, I think they need to get one more, because then there's a mental hurdle that you've cleared. Like you were underwater, like they were underwater and they couldn't even see the light. There was just this little flicker of light up toward the surface. And if you get back there today without having any setbacks and you're 7-7 and you can wake up on Valentine's Day and you're 7-7, that's a beautiful thing. And I think it would represent a mental hurdle for this team that they could look back on in March when that bracket comes out, and it's going to be you're going to face a good team. And you could say, look what we did. Look what we did in February. This is nothing.
You use the water analogy. I'll use like I'm thinking of like a road trip. Let's, as people here in Nebraska are used to taking very long road trips to get to Big Ten sporting events or whatever it might be, a road football game. So let's say you got
some people use the airplane.
Yeah, but some people use the car, and we're talking about a 12-14 hour road trip. And
oh yeah, wow.
You knock out. I think what Nebraska's done by winning these 4 games in a row now is basically knock out the first 8 to 10 hours in one shot. They have made themselves a lot of they're making great time, as the Midwestern father would say, and they didn't take very many bathroom breaks, and nobody's sad in the backseat yet. They knocked out a good chunk of it right away.
So they drove all across Iowa and Illinois without stopping. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's what they did. And see, you don't now Tonight, if you lose, it's like you're still on the road, but it's almost like, you had to, it's almost like you had to get off you had to double back for gas or something like that, which is, there's nothing worse. Like you were going west to east and you realized that you had 40 miles left on the tank and there wasn't another gas station, and you had to turn around and go back the other direction to get gas. That's what losing tonight is like for me. You can still get there and it's going to be okay. But you have all this progress going, like all of this momentum that's going right now. In that 7-7, it's right there in front of you. But Maryland is good, and we should talk about what Nebraska doesn't have tonight in its gas tank, and that's Berke Buchtenchel.
Nice
problem for the Huskers.
I think so. Just in the sense of he gives you a space eater and a big body. But like, it's not like he's this huge effort rebounder, kind of guy either. I think Nebraska, I think, when we think about size, and that's what Maryland has, right? That, Derek Queen and Julian Reese are a couple big guys. And then you think about teams like that and you just, how are they going to be able to rebound, especially against a small team like Nebraska? I just like, obviously the physical advantages give you an advantage right out of the gate, but I just think a lot of that stuff is just it's just a mindset and it's an effort type of thing. Like Nebraska could send people to the boards, and I think they could find themselves a little bit of an area to make some moves against this team that looks a little bit different than some of the other teams that you have been playing. So I don't know that I'm too worried about that. I don't want to downplay him getting hurt. Like I think he could be a dynamic player when he's on. But I don't know that it would affect my like prediction or my thought on Nebraska winning the game tonight. I feel like if I was picking them to win, which I'm not they have a chance to do so, I don't think it would change based on them not having Berke.
I'd feel better if Berke was there. So if they get in foul trouble tonight, are we going to see? Maybe Fred addressed this on Wednesday. I don't think he laid out the starting lineup, but are we going to see Braxton Mia in the starting lineup? I would assume that's what happens. You're going to play a really big front line with Mia and Morgan. How do you attack this thing?
Instead of trying to, I don't know what Fred said yesterday, but instead of trying to attack, or match them with size, like I'd probably go small to be honest with you, like have some guys who could spread it out and shoot it a little bit. And frankly, Nebraska's gone with a billion different starting lineups over this past few weeks here too. So it wouldn't surprise me necessarily at anything they saw. I probably don't see Mia in the starting lineup. He seems like a off the bench, 10 minutes.
So Morgan then.
Maybe you probably go with Morgan and go smaller and try and figure out some things from there.
I did see his comment saying that Cale Jacobson is their third guy in at the 5 right now because he knows the position well. And I'm thinking, well, he doesn't have the size. Obviously, he's not the guy that you want to have in there. So one thing to watch in the game tonight is if Nebraska gets in foul trouble, that could truly become a problem. You can debate whether having Buchtenchel available is truly like a major issue. But if Nebraska's playing with Jacobson for extended minutes, trying to defend Queen and Reese, or one of the two, not both, then I think you've run into some real issues. I mean, good piece to have on your team, but not somebody that you want to stick in there against Maryland and say, all right, go defend that big guy.
Yeah. So Nebraska's they're in a good spot right now. But I think what we've learned in this conversation is that if you win it tonight, you go up another half a step or another.
I think you clear a hurdle. So and then the question is there even a mental hurdle for the team? And I'm talking about a bigger mental hurdle. Is there a mental hurdle for this Nebraska basketball team? Because, as you said, it's Nebraska basketball and bad things tend to happen. Do you think that factors at all for anyone within that locker room?
Well, I don't think they're thinking about what Nebraska basketball hasn't been, I think there might be a little bit of pressure that wouldn't be there had Nebraska basketball as a program won an NCAA tournament game ever, right? Like, little bit. Does it affect them on a day-to-day basis? I don't think so. I think most of the pressure that's on this team is, comes from the idea that, they want to be the team to be able to do that. But I think the pressure kind of comes from the idea that you haven't necessarily been that team consistently this year, right? Like, you felt good about yourself at the end of December or to start the new year. And then I think you had your confidence rocked there a little bit. And so I haven't, and I know I saw this as one of the quotes that Fred said yesterday, but it just feels like game by game in this 4-game winning streak, they're getting their I always call it the defensive teeth, like the real edge back. And until I see that again, like I'm not going to believe it. So maybe tonight is the night where they feel like, all right, we're really on the doorstep of something. And, you find that effort that you've had in a few select games this year, because that's got to be there every night if you're playing in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. All right. Big game at PBA tonight. I'll stand on my take that this one will matter a lot in March and how Nebraska can approach the challenge in March if it can get over this hurdle tonight. So we're not making picks, but the Huskers are a 1.5-point favorite. Can go from 2-7 in the Big Ten to 7-7 in the Big Ten and beat 3 ranked teams to get there. Pretty good accomplishment if Nebraska makes it there. We'll see on Friday morning. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk about football. Shift gears. What are Nebraska's college football playoff expectations as a program? That's coming up next.
But first, a word from our friends from the FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than with the FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you could even place live bets throughout the game. So if you miss the opening tip-off or you're too late getting to it, or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback that you could just smell coming, you could stay in the action with FanDuel. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you could combine your live bets into a live same game parlay. That's what I'm talking about on FanDuel. And then there's the traditional options as well before the game even begins. Or I like some long-term bets where you're betting on who might win the NBA Finals or who might get to the NBA Finals, who might win MVP. Those are all out there for you right now. New FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Welcome back. Thursday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Cast. Mitch Sherman of The Athletic, Connor Happer, 1620 The Zone is with me. Friday coming up, Valentine's Day edition. Get your mailbag questions in. We will answer them. Today we're covering all sports or mini sports Nebraska related. So you got something basketball, football, baseball, softball, whatever it might be. It's in season for us. Email is lockedonneb@gmail.com. You can hit us also on Twitter. On Wednesday, Connor, want to get into this subject a bit. My colleague at The Athletic, Stewart Mandel, came out with a list of college football programs in response to a mailbag question of his own as it relates to their expectations around the college football playoff. Stu put all of the power programs and some G5 programs into a tier system, 5 tiers. The first tier, you expect to compete for national championships every year. That's basically just Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Tier 2, you expect to make it every year. Tier 3, you expect to get there every 3 to 5 years. Tier 4, you expect to get there every 10 years. And even one victory, one game is very exciting. Tier 5, it's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence, which is where Indiana slotted. So, sorry, Hoosiers, you're never getting back. In Stu's analysis, Nebraska came in along with Iowa in tier 4. So that's once every 10 years is the expectation. That on its face didn't really throw me. I was like, okay. But then I looked at tier 3 and I saw This is every 3 to 5 years is the expectation. I saw Michigan State. I saw Washington. I saw Utah, Boise State, TCU, which of course has been to the playoff. So has Michigan State in a 4-team system. Washington has been to a championship game. Are those teams in a place, those programs in a place where the expectation should be that much higher than what it is for Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas? I'm taking some issue with Stu.
So I guess I have a functional question, like how it works. So is he saying this is what your expectations should be, like if you're the fan base, or is this like this is what you're gonna get, if you play it out over X amount of time?
Well, that's open to interpretation. I think
Right.
it's more about what the team expects, what the program expects, than what the fan base should expect. Because the fan base, they're going to be out of whack at time. Some fan bases, are more so in that category than others. My understanding, my read of this, and it's not exactly laid out in the way that Stu answers it. My belief, and this is how he wrote it. This is what the program expects. So internally, the expectation for Nebraska in his answer is that it should expect to make it about once every 10 years.
Okay, so my question off of that would be, why in the hell would Michigan State have higher expectations than Nebraska? I'm not sure I understand that one. TCU.
It's almost like he looked at who made it in the 4-team and said,
"No,
hey, you got there. Michigan State 2015, TCU played in the championship. What? But that's not to me indicative of what the expectations are going forward.
No,
you have to look at resources. You have to look at, and maybe I'm getting too in the weeds and over analyzing this, but you got to look at college football today and what it is. And Nebraska has inherent advantages over TCU and Michigan State. So does Iowa. So does Missouri. So does Arkansas.
Yeah, I think this has probably a little bit too much recency bias to it, like your point. Now if you were to tell me in 10 years that Nebraska over the last 10 years starting now made the playoff just one time, it's hard to know how we would feel about that, considering what they were like in the in-between and stuff like that. But as I sit here right now, I think Nebraska is the kind of program that can be in the playoff once every 3 to 5 years, just as I thought that they would be able to be competing for Big Ten, they compete for Big Ten championships, to be in the conversation to win the Big Ten West every 3 out of 5 years. I think that's even a number that I probably threw out there at one point. So it's the same type of deal, I think. And I don't think that expectation should go anywhere at a place like Nebraska, considering, like you said, Mitch, the resources and the things that they have. Like, I don't know. Do people not think about Nebraska football nationally in the same way that, like, if I'm doing globally Nebraska football, I will tell you that the expectations should stay high here, because what Nebraska has done for the last 10, 15 years has been criminally underperform, like for what their talent is, for what their program is, for what their resources are, like all those, they've underperformed. But all of those things that got that are true that I just said, that those still exist. So just perform, and then we'll see what happens. Or maybe if you're lucky, overperform, right? Like that is possible. I know we haven't seen it in a while.
The teams that he has joining Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas are SMU, Louisville, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Pitt, Baylor, BYU, Kansas State, Colorado, Cincinnati, UCF, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Washington State. So some of them, yes, I think are on a similar plane as the Huskers and the Hawkeyes. But I'm again, like, going back to the fact that you have Washington, Wisconsin, Michigan State, TCU, Utah, and Boise State in that tier ahead, and I just don't see the separation there. So whatever. Everyone else is in tier 5, he said, including Indiana. So there's probably not a whole lot more to say about this. I did get a response. I expressed my disagreement with this list on social media Wednesday, and I got a response, which is, I guess, what you'd expect, and it's that Nebraska just made a bowl game for the first time in 8 years, and got to 7 wins. Why don't you talk about doing something else before you even consider the playoff? And it's like, okay, yeah, I understand. Like there's nothing that's
So
that's
we're just
factually incorrect about that.
Yeah.
We're not talking about what we expect from Nebraska in 2025.
Right. So got it. That tells me everything I need to know. We're just incapable of having this conversation. I think,
that was not a response from Stu, by the way.
Yeah, not us. I'm talking about like how fans view programs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can't see that Nebraska is still one of the programs that has all of those things that I just talked about, like the ability to be a consistent winner. Like if you can't see that, and maybe your answer is, well, everybody's got it. All you have to have is a good coach. And I'm like, well, no, that's not necessarily true in college football. That's not how it works in college football. Like you have to have some things, be in one of these conferences and have the resources and have support and the facilities and the recruiting ability and the budget and whatever, like the NIL now and the rev sharing and all that stuff.
Many of these programs that Nebraska's grouped with, and I'll just say Iowa too, because it's not just a Nebraska discussion, but many of these programs that Nebraska and Iowa, Missouri are grouped with here in Tier 4 are not going to have the ability to pay their players the amount of money that they're allowed to pay them. Plain and simple. They're in a different class of existence within the hierarchy of the sport. You can compare it to the professional ranks and say it's like the big market team versus the small market team. And the small market team does have the ability to compete, but there's other reasons for that. And they don't have the same kind of expectations. The Royals don't have the same expectations as the Yankees. So we don't need to classify them the same. And we're getting to the point where similar discussions need to happen. And we need to look at college sports the same way.
I'm with you. All right. Let's take a break. We continue the trio of sports. We move on to baseball, which starts tomorrow after this. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you, closing out a Thursday podcast. Once again, get your questions in for the mailbag wherever you'd like to get in touch with us. We will find it, whether it be on Twitter or at lockedonneb@gmail.com or leaving a YouTube comment. I'm sure there's probably more ways to do it as well. Nebraska baseball opens their season tomorrow in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. They're going to have
warm weather, better than it is here. It's below zero today in Lincoln. And if you're going to the Nebraska basketball game tonight, hopefully you don't have to walk across the bridge from the Haymarket Park area. It's going to be a brutal one up there in the exposed air.
So they're going to have 3. It's really a 4-game weekend because they're going to play 3 at the spring training complexes this weekend against UC Irvine, Vanderbilt, and San Diego State. Salt River Fields at Talking Stick. I believe that's where the Rockies play. Yeah. And then Sloan Park is where the Cubs play, which is a newer, cool park. They'll play there on Sunday against San Diego State. And then they'll play at Grand Canyon in a true road game on Monday. So they'll extend the trip by a day. But that's the opening weekend for Nebraska baseball, who was picked second in the Big Ten yesterday behind Oregon. I love the Big Ten, but they do their preseason polls, and
did they just pick 6 teams?
It's just like, here's 6 teams, take them. And then when they do an all conference team before the season, they're like, here are just some players that are good. There's 5, take them. And I'm all right. Thank you, Big Ten.
They do that in football too, with the preseason all conference. Although they do actually pick. Well, maybe they don't, because I'm so used to the media run preseason all Big Ten team.
I don't think they do.
They don't.
I don't think
They pick an order of teams, right? Do the league coaches do a preseason
no,
poll? They don't.
They
No,
outsource
they don't.
that to Cleveland.com. And then when they do the players, when they do the all conference team, assign an all conference team, they have like honors or like preseason honors, and they just like list 6 guys, and they're like, take these 6 guys and do something with them. And that's
Is it just a laziness thing? Like, can they not get their stuff together enough to make a preseason poll, or do they not want to offend each other by having someone picked last? I don't. The coaches picked Purdue to finish last in the Big Ten, and oh my God,
very offensive.
Yeah. So they picked 6 in Big Ten baseball, the top 6. The other 12. Well, there's 11. Come on, Wisconsin. The other 11, I guess they're playing this year, but we're not entirely sure based on the preseason poll. So Oregon picked to win the league. That's this is a new day for Big Ten baseball, because you can actually play at Big Ten home stadiums in February and have it not be 37 degrees.
Yeah,
early March.
Yeah. With that being said, I do think it's funny how Nebraska, they're hosting Washington the first weekend in March, or the second weekend in March. I guess it'd be, the first Big Ten weekend. So that's funny.
You see who's coming in at the end of March. Oregon State, the Beavers. The Big Ten should have adopted them and let the Beavers be an honorary baseball member, kind of like the ACC does for Notre Dame in every sport but football, or you see happen in hockey and various things. Wrestling has some of that going on. Like bring in Oregon State to the Big Ten. I'd be in favor of that. And hey, if does Washington State, they play baseball. Bring them in too.
I'm curious to see what happens with those new teams. I remember exactly my feelings on what Nebraska baseball would be like joining the Big Ten Conference 15 years ago.
You weren't happy.
Well, I wasn't happy about it, but I was pretty convinced that Nebraska would never lose another game again.
Right.
And so that quickly proved to be untrue. And now some of that was due to Nebraska's failures as a program, but some of it was due to getting, I say, like sucked into the Big Ten baseball vortex. So Oregon's been a super regional team for the last couple of years now, and they're knocking on the door of Omaha. They're in a really interesting position right now, and as they join the Big Ten Conference.
I don't know if they play at Michigan State this year, but whenever the Ducks do go play at Michigan State, that's going to be like the welcome to the Big Ten moment. There will be others where it's like you show up and there's a hill in the outfield, and there's
8 people there.
The television production is being done with an iPhone, and you're wondering, what are we doing here? Why did we fly across the country to do this?
Oregon does indeed go to Michigan State this year on the first weekend in May. So at least it won't be cold. It'll just be not welcoming, I guess.
Yeah. So Nebraska's got Mason McConaughey. Sorry, man.
Nice.
Matthew McConaughey is not pitching for Nebraska on Friday nights this year. No. But I was actually trying not to do that, and I reverse psychology myself into doing that. But Mason is the Huskers ace this year. I'm interested to see the number 2 guy, Ty Horn. So I saw him pitch as a true freshman last year early in the season, and my thought was, wow, this guy looks really good. He's throwing mid 90s, mixing in some breaking pitches. Like, if he can have it together on the mound, he has Friday night stuff. And he went the other direction as a freshman and kind of lost some of his command and confidence, and got a welcome to college baseball kind of moment at times. And it wasn't reliable, but it seems that Rob Childress has fixed him, Nebraska's pitching coach, and he's going to be he's scheduled to go against Vanderbilt on Saturday. That's interesting. So you talk about a power program from the SEC. Going to see Nebraska's probably the Huskers' best arm, although McConaughey is their best pitcher.
Yeah, complicated because you have opportunities to, to play really good teams right out of the gate here, but you're working on getting pitch counts up, and you're probably on innings limits or pitch limits at this point. So they'll go with some familiar names to start off and let those guys roll, like McConaughey and Horn. You mentioned Will Walsh will go on Sunday, and Jackson Brockett on Monday.
He had the no-hitter.
Yes, that's right. All those guys really had their moments last year. Will Walsh was pretty epic in Omaha at the Big Ten tournament last year, and I think it was a semifinal game.
Yeah. You remember what happened last year when Nebraska played at Grand Canyon?
Yes.
It got chippy.
Yes, that's right. I remember watching that game on my computer there was a ESPN Plus broadcast, thinking, what is going on right now?
Yeah, it got heated. They played more than one game against Grand Canyon, and they did not. There was not a lot of love left on the field. So interesting to see what happens this year when Grand Canyon is one of those up and coming programs, like a newer school. Kind of like in the Dallas Baptist category, where you smack them down in the middle of a major metropolitan area in the South where there's players everywhere, and lo and behold, like their baseball program becomes a nationally relevant in a very short period of time. So I don't remember exactly what happened between the Huskers and Grand Canyon, but maybe it'll get revisited on Monday. And Nebraska, they're in Texas. They're in Louisiana next weekend for 3 games against 3 or 4 against Louisiana. Then they go to Frisco. Got LSU coming up on the schedule March 1st. So lots to look forward to with Nebraska baseball. Excited to see the college baseball season getting kicked off. I'm going to be writing more baseball for the Athletic this year, more college baseball during the season. Got some things that I'm excited to do. We'll see if Nebraska is good enough to warrant some national attention. But regardless, I will be paying attention to the sport before we get to the postseason in June.
Very good. Well, it's -5 outside, which means baseball is here. College baseball.
Kids are wearing shorts. Hey.
Appreciate you making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig puts the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.